The High Court verdict is a very significant one. Why I am saying it is very significant? Because it is a kind of a follow-up to a lot of struggle which has also happened in the ground. The case was taken by High Court by itself. It's a suo motu case, seeing the extent of the destruction which happened in the area. Immediately after the landslide, the agents went into the relief camps to extract EMI, and that is when the whole society became so angry at the level of what is called the bankers trying to extract the last penny from people's hands. Even after going through such a disaster, almost wiping away people, their land, their houses, and many of them had nothing in their hand except for the clothes they were wearing. But the banks were there to get the EMI. People protested. And then the Chief Minister of Kerala, respected Pinarayi, he went and attended the bankers conference, where all banks in a particular region, in say for example Kerala, have a committee which decides on the loans. So in the bankers committee, the CM went and requested personally that the loans be waived off. And as an example, he said that the bank which is in the control of the state, which is basically the Kerala Bank, he also said the decision of the Kerala Bank to waive off the loans and asked other banks to follow the example given by the Kerala Bank. Unfortunately, for the past 1 year, almost every other meeting of the bankers committee, the chief secretary raised this question, and it is not being answered. This is the context in which the High Court has come in. High Court has been clearly arguing for a relief to the people. So when initially the central government said that this cannot be done, there is no relevant provisions, we are thinking about it, court asked them to go back, discuss, and then come back with a clear cut of an oral suggestion that you need to approach this very humanely. Meanwhile, what happened? The government of India amended the Disaster Management Act, and the provisions which allowed for the write-offs were deleted by an act of the parliament. What happened next was that the central government going to the High Court and saying that since the relevant portion of the act has been deleted, it is no more in force, we were not able to give them the relief, which is according to the High Court had repeatedly pointed off, this is not true. You have so many other powers within you. Clearly High Court mentions, okay, look at the Article 73, look at other relevant provisions which you have under your control to effect this change, and you should not fool the people with such a kind of an approach, saying that this is not possible and you don't have the right, or you don't have the powers to do it, which was ultimately not done. The High Court verdict was an acknowledgement of the debt, of the disaster, and the impact which people have been going through. In that case, this is very relevant. Second, till now, the approach has been to give relief, and the relief did not look into the issues which are being faced by the people. So you have built a house taking a bank loan, and your house was destroyed, You may be given another house by the state, but you are still paying the EMI of the house you have built and has been destroyed. How can this be right? This is an act of God, or it's an act or a natural disaster which is not affected by the people. And given its situation, the state has a responsibility to care for its subjects. And the banks make their profit from the savings of the people. And when an entire community is under distress, is it not the bank's responsibility to share their profits in a way that the people are able to rebuild their lives? Which is what the banks lacked. A humane approach, even a kind of forgetting that it is the people who makes the bank. Where does the capital come from? Indian banks' capital comes from the deposits, not from anywhere else. So this is a pointer to the High Court verdict. The pointer which High Court has pointed out. Second, when the central government said they are no longer able to do this, in fact, after multiple spaces for them to, the court said that go back and discuss with your committee, discuss with the ministry and come back. In spite of this, when the central government was not responding positively, the bank took the next step. They said, all of you, the banks, the public sector banks, now I am giving you the notice. Tell me whether you could write off the loans, and if not, why? So the High Court in its power has been trying to give this message again and again that banks needs to be socially accountable. Banks need to address the problems of the people. I think this is a first High Court verdict under our information anywhere on such a subject, asking the banks to be socially and ethically responsible, and that is the significance of this verdict. After the landslide and after the recovery agents going into the relief camps, it made big news. People mobilized first, asking for a moratorium. The idea was not well developed in the beginning. So the whole idea was that let there be a moratorium, let them not be troubled as of now, rather than looking into in the depth of the problem. But then there has been some mobilizations when banks tried to ask people for EMI. People, mobilized, marched into the banks. Simultaneously, the state government, some of the ministers who were there, took a very strong position asking the banks not to disturb the people at this point of time, which gave the confidence among people how to deal with the situation. So immediately after the relief phase was over, the first phase was relief, in which the broader issues were not to be addressed. It was, cleaning the houses and helping people to survive, giving food, etc., the trauma care and other things around. One of the organizations which were part of the relief, which is the Churalmala Relief Center, then they called up a wider segment of people asking what can be done with the loans, how this could be addressed. So that led to a wider discussion where we also connected with the former General Secretary of the All India Bank Officers Confederation, Comrade Franco, and then had a brainstorming session. What to be done, how this could be taken forward. These are the issues before the people. So with the help of Comrade Franco, who was a banker and a trade unionist, People were able to develop an understanding about the situation and what to be demanded from the banks. Simultaneously, the argument that what we need was not a moratorium, but what we need is a loan waiver was first made by the communities in this perspective. So the whole idea was also that the issues of compensation should move from people owning property to people who have been losing their livelihood. So in the whole disaster, there were two sections of people. One who was so-called directly affected, and the others are also directly affected, but their livelihood is affected. And the people whose livelihood were affected, who were depending upon this particular area for their livelihood, say for example tourism, say for example the drivers who drive auto rickshaws, taxis, etc., etc., they said, we are not able to pay back our EMIs. We are not seeing a relief in sight for a longer period of time because tourism was affected in this whole process, and how are we going to repay our loans? So they demanded that livelihood compensation be considered as a way of a state response to the disaster, and not just rebuilding houses or a township or an infrastructure development like roads, etc., etc. It has to be on multiple grounds. So that started the debate because tourism was heavily affected, and that was not, it was not anywhere in sight that it will come back soon because of the changes in the geography and certain reports saying that this area is not fit for more investments. This is fragile. That was the context in which the people started mobilizing. And once they started mobilizing, they began talking to each other on their issues. Farmers were saying that we had taken a loan to farm. Our farm is now full of sludge. We are not able to get anything based on from any produce this year. But then we are supposed to pay back our loans. How do we pay back? See, if our farm has been completely destroyed, our loan was or for the inputs for this period, so that has to be waived off. There is no other way. People got scattered, so their employments have been affected, their connections have been affected. So they said, what about us? How do we repay the banks? Can't it be waived off? Somebody then started calculating it. The banks themselves calculated it comes around 35 crores, which is minuscule given the amount of money which goes back into building roads and building houses. This is directly going to the people. If you waive these loans, it also reduces the mental health issues. Why I am saying mental health issues? People are in constant trouble of how do we repay. And we know deaths, suicides based on debt is quite common in our country. And if we could address that by giving a loan relief, that would be a policy position which would highly benefit the communities in place. Likewise, women. There are savings groups of women, the Kudumbasrees, where people who took the loans died in the disaster. Then who will repay? The rest of the people have to repay the loan of a person who have lost his or her life. Is it a responsible state policy then to write that off, rather than putting that burden on the rest of the women's groups who are equally affected and cannot survive by themselves. So these are the arguments which we have raised, and they have mobilized. People have put posters. People have taken out rallies to the public ground. People like Medha Patkar, people like Comrade Franco, organizations like Center for Financial Accountability, all supported, saying that this is a valid argument and this argument has to be taken forward. After the initial arguments for loan relief, the women in the community came together. They had an organization. They were all part of the state mission, the state livelihood mission, the Kudumbashree units. They computed how much loans they have. They had two kinds of loans. One was the linkage loans given by the banks, and second was the savings loans. Their linkage loan, they have been so prompt in repaying till the disaster. And after the disaster, they couldn't repay. They are not there, they are scattered, their livelihood is not there. We computed how much it is. It is less than 3 crores for all the women in the area. Then we looked into how much is needed for their savings loans. Less than 1 crore. So you have a huge number of people who have been the mainstay of families, who have been running families, in spite of the fact that about 47 of their colleagues in Kudumbashree passed away. They're still continuing. They still were in the forefront in terms of relief, those who were alive. They're still mobilizing so that their families can live. They came together to form what is called the Women for Loan Relief, and they went to the High Court, saying that at that point of time the verdict was not out. They said, kindly hear us. We are women from the affected community. We are not in a position to repay, and what is needed is a very minuscule amount from the perspective of the banks, which could help us and our families. They said, please write off our loans. Give us new loans which we will repay, and make us also part in the micro plan which the government of Kerala was doing. Not just the directly affected community, but everybody in those wards. 3 wards, 10, 11 and 12. Now there has been a reconfiguration of the wards, but at that time 10, 11 and 12 wards were the wards which were completely affected. So give every woman in those wards a chance to rebuild. Give new loans to the societies, to the units, not to individuals. At least to the units, so that they can start the activities, and linking it with a micro plan for a livelihood restoration, that could work. And now women is in the forefront, and they are now the earlier groups which have demanded for the loan relief had an initial frustration. They thought that the banks will respond. They thought that the central government will respond. They thought that things would move. But after the Disaster Management Act and the relevant provisions were deleted, they also got little frustrated. They went back, they became silent. And when they became silent, women came back. Women came back and said, the others could be silent, but we were silent till now, but we can't be silent anymore. The experience in Wayanad brought us in touch with the Reserve Bank. The Reserve Bank has a master guideline on how to respond to climate disasters. The Disaster Management Act at that point of time had a provision. One has to understand the Disaster Management Act in India came about in the context of tsunami, where massive deaths and disruptions had happened, and they had integrated a provision for loan relief in the Act itself. The Reserve Bank Master Guideline falls short in terms of a write-off, but it is not a ruled out provision in the sense that, though explicitly it is not mentioning a write-off, if you look into the spirit of that master guideline, it could be improved to integrate write-off as one of the ways in which the banks have to respond to a given situation, particularly a natural disaster. How does one do that? That experience have to be built with some of the tsunami experience, some of the Wayanad experience, but one is quite clear that this provision of write-offs at one level and new loans, or rather even micro plans to support people to come out of the existing disaster, is very integral into this in this formulation. It also raises questions to the banks. The banks are they not institutions of the people? Are they not institutions which have to cater to the segment of the population from which they derive their deposit, where they derive their profit, and whether and to whom they are supposed to serve? The banks in India, the public sector banks in India, their foremost responsibility is to serve the unserved. It is not about profits. Profits may be part of it, but they have a responsibility to act responsibly, ethically, and humanely to situations such as a natural disaster. In fact, we are seeing disasters of various kinds. Not just landslides, we are seeing rising heat waves, we are seeing floods, we are seeing cloudbursts. How does one respond to some of these situations? And how does one make provisioning in the disaster management funds, in the climate responses, so that rebuilding of people, families and communities happen at a level which are deeper than rebuilding infrastructure? It is people and communities who have to be rebuilt, and for that a provision and provisions, not just of write-off but of loans without interest, micro plans which would help rebuild, has to be essential part of the overall rebuilding process. I'm not saying that has to be the only provision. There are existing other work which happens, and this has to be added to it, and that will alleviate so much of mental distress, that will help communities and families build back better.